It's a podcast. It's a podcast. It's a podcast.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy and Other Stuff podcast. I am your host, Jonah. Before I do anything else, I want to address for anyone who's watching the video right now, I am not in jail. That may have been your first thought when you started up the video was, where the hell is Jonah right now? Did he get thrown into jail in Japan? I did not. I'm just in a crappy hotel in Bangkok, and I gotta let you know, this is it. There is no secret other space in this room. What you see is the entire thing. I'm sitting on the bed. There's the wall behind me, and then just out of frame on this side, that's the door. That's the entire room. And then you're sitting on this little ledge with like a mirror behind you and a tiny trash can. That's the whole room. That's the entire room. And you know, I got what I paid for. I didn't spend very much money on this room, thank God. But I walked in and I was like, this is the jankiest of the jank that I have ever stayed in. At least I have air conditioning. I have an air conditioner up here. This is a fun story before I get into the topic for today's video. I used to live in Thailand for like 5-6 months. And so I spent a month in Bangkok, and this was like during COVID, so everything was starting to shut down. So I moved to the islands in Thailand, like Phuket and Koh Samui. And I was staying in a hostel for my first like 3 days there. Not a hostel. They called it a hotel. Okay, it was not a hotel. Okay, I had a bed and a fan that would only go to half speed, which if you've ever been to Thailand or Southeast Asia, you know that's fucking crazy. That's insane. A fan that not even a full speed fan. That's how you die. That's how you die in Southeast Asia. Anyways, I am not in jail. That's the point of what I'm saying here. I just arrived in Bangkok. I've been here for like an hour, 2 hours. 3 hours, Jesus Christ, 3 hours, I've been here for 3 hours, I don't know how that happened. I spent a while just eating food and walking around, and I'm having a great time. You'll get more on that in the weekly update, but I'm going to use this as a segue here. My flight from Tokyo to Bangkok, one of the most miserable flights of my entire life. It was awful. I was crammed between two people the entire way. My knees were squished up against the seat in front of me. I could barely recline, and the worst part was, I've never seen this before. In my entire life, I've never seen this before. The TVs didn't work. Like on the seats, no one's worked. It wasn't just mine. It was like was it something I was supposed to pay for, or like, I don't know. I've just never seen that before. I went in expecting that I would be able to watch like a movie or two on the way there. So I didn't download anything beforehand. Oopsie daisy. I made a big goof there. I had nothing to do for the whole plane ride. Thankfully, and this is where the segue comes in, last week, before I came to Japan, I downloaded like 90 chapters of One Piece onto my iPad because I'm doing a reread. And I was like, well, if I find myself with some downtime, I can just read some chapters of One Piece. So I had that, and I had the book I've been reading, Dawn by Octavia Butler, which was, I read a bunch of, I read till like, I'm like at 65% or something. So I read a lot of that book. And then I read a lot of One Piece, but I don't have the stamina of an Olympic runner, okay? I can read for spurts of like an hour or two at most, and then I have to go do something else. And unfortunately, I could not do that on the plane. So, miserable. But, we're at the segue part of what I was just mentioning. I love One Piece. I love it so goddamn much, man. I love it so much. Oh my god. And you want to know a big reason for that? It's because the characters are incredible. The entire cast that Eiichiro Oda has crafted over the past 27 years is just, it's so good. Each character is so memorable in their own way. They all have there's characteristics that define them, and they all have depth, but some of them are, some of them have more tragic backstories than others. I don't want to say anything in case you plan on reading One Piece eventually, but even the characters that come across as simple consistently surprise me as characters. They're people that are consistently engaging and constantly have something they're doing that keeps me glued to them on the page. And there's no better example of that than Luffy, the main character, who I have seen people say is flat. I've seen people say he's just like generic anime protagonist. And I I swear to God, it's like we're living on different planets. I swear, it's like we're not even experiencing the same story. Luffy is one of the most consistently magnetic and engaging characters ever created in fiction, and I will stand by that statement. I think he is one of the most incredible protagonists that has ever been crafted. And it's not because he's got the depth and somber backstory that so many protagonists have that makes them brilliant. Luffy, the reason he's so engaging as a character and the reason he's so surprising to me is that he's not simple. And when he is simple, it's for things that are very it's something things you can just observe through reading the story by shutting your brain off. Luffy really likes food. Luffy is a very excitable person. Luffy does not like bad people. Wow, okay, that's like 3 things that if you're just shutting your brain off, that's all you'll get out of him. But if you're really reading into this story and if you're really paying attention to the things he says and the things he does, his simplicity has depth. Like there's so much to him that is just right under the surface. And because we never get in his head, because we never hear his thoughts, we only see his actions, he's consistently surprising. He's not a simple person, even when it seems like he is. And I can't describe it any better than that. He's just someone who, every time he does something in this story, and you can tell that it's emotionally affecting him, there's more depth to it than just, oh, he's a good person. Or, oh, he's just like this goofy kid. There's so much more. Those are aspects of who he is, but if you peel back the layers just a little bit, this is a character that is so rich with meaning and emotion, and he's brilliant. He's a brilliant character, and I don't know that I've ever encountered another character in fiction like him, because typically, with a story in the magnitude of One Piece, something that's been going on for 27 years, and that has thousands of chapters, you know the protagonist super well. Like, you're in their head, and you know them to their roots. And I would argue even in large, multi-POV fantasy stories, that's more of the case than what you have with Luffy, because Luffy never really tells people how he's feeling, and he never shares his thoughts. Like, he kind of just does stuff, and you have to extrapolate meaning from that. There are times, particularly around the midpoint of the story, where he does talk about his emotions, but it's because he's been, utterly wrecked by events in the story, and it's him trying to process what he's been through. And that, to me, again, is another brilliant aspect of his character. I could go on and on and on. My point is, Luffy is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and doing my reread now, I'm only about 40 chapters in. I did most of that on the plane. I'm remembering how much I love him and why. And I didn't realize it when I first started that story, so now doing a reread and revisiting those early parts of the story, I'm getting so much more out of them, because I now know just how much depth this story has. So doing a reread has been really valuable for me, because I, like most people, started One Piece thinking, oh, it's just going to be a silly pirate anime, and then it ended up being so much. I mean, God, I can't overhype how much I love One Piece and how incredible of a story it is. My advice, if you have not read One Piece, if you haven't watched One Piece, and maybe you're daunted by the length, or maybe you just think it's not going to be for you because you think it's like a kid's story, if you go into One Piece, do it with the mind of a scholar. And that might sound crazy, but seriously, Ichiro Oda is he is a generational genius. The man is you know what? I've already talked about it enough. This is the segue to the point of this video, which is I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite characters. So, from One Piece, Luffy will forever and always be my favorite character, and I think that's actually an anomaly, especially in anime. The protagonist is almost never my favorite character in anime. It's almost always someone else, but Luffy, he's just got this magnetism about him that is undeniable, and every single time I start going, oh, maybe I like this character more, Luffy does something that makes me go, no, it's always going to be him. It will always be him. And I love him for that. But let's move on from One Piece, because I've spent the first 10 minutes already talking about this. So that's my favorite character from One Piece. And really what actually sparked this video idea, last week when I originally recorded it and then it got banished to the Shadow Realm was Fitz from the Realm of the Elderlings. So I finished the Tawny Man trilogy last week, and the journey I went on with Fitz in that trilogy is just, it's hard to explain unless you've actually read the series, but it is epic fantasy as intimate as it's ever been written. Like, the way I know Fitz, the way I understand Fitz and his emotions and his actions and just the way he sees the world, the way he thinks, is unlike the relationship I've ever had to another fictional character in my entire life. Like, I know Fitz. Like, it's like he's my best friend who has told me their entire life story, and like, I get them. Or like, even like a best friend that I grew up with and I've like seen mature, and I know like why, you know, certain things affected them a certain way. And it's just, I've never seen that before in a fantasy series where you're that close to the character. Like, you're that in their head. You're that tied to their emotions. And I think it's something extremely special that the Realm of the Elderlings has done. And it also changes sort of the perspective or I guess the approach that Robin Hobb, I think, has to the story, because there's not really as much of a focus on the spectacle and the magic and the wonder of the world that a lot of fantasy series have. The entire point of the Realm of the Elderlings is Fitz. It's his relationships to other people. It's his emotions. It's his inner journey. That is what the Realm of the Elderlings is about. It's not necessarily about the external events. It's about the characters and their even mundane transformations, things about them that are, watching them go through like the boring parts of their day is what Robin Hobb is interested in, because it reveals something about character. And I think it's beautifully done. It's incredible, because that connection that you get with them, you also then get with the side characters, because you understand why Fitz feels the way he does about them, and the way that they speak to each other, and just the arguments they have, and the way that they... it's so hard to explain unless you've read it, but it's just... these characters feel like actual, real human beings. Like, they feel like as rich with depth and complexity as any real human being would be. That was, like, telling you about their life, you know? I don't know how she does it. I have no idea how Robin Hobb doesn't get bogged down in the external events, or, you know, lose the thread, I guess. Lose the thread of Fitz's emotions. Because I as a writer, and this is not me comparing myself to Robin Hobb, but I lose that all the time when I'm writing characters. I'm like, okay, wait, so from this scene to this scene, how would they feel now? And how do I make that feel organic? But it feels like Robin Hobb just knows. Like, she just knows all the time, organically, how Fitz would feel, how he would react. All the time. Like, and he feels natural in everything he does. It's just that, yeah, that's what Fitz would do. Like, there's never been a moment in this entire series that has felt out of character or out of line with where he is emotionally in his journey. It's, dude, incredible writing. I think he is one of the greatest fictional characters ever conceived. There has never been anyone like him, and there probably never will be anyone like him, because I don't know that anyone would even want to attempt trying to write a character like that that's not Robin Hobb. And that's part of the reason those books are so devastating, is because I just feel like I know him so well, so I care so much about him and the things he's going through, that his heartbreak feels like my heartbreak, you know? It feels like someone I truly love and care about that's going through something, and my heart breaks for him, and it's really sad. So that's the brilliance, I think, of that story and of Fitz. So there we have two very different characters to start this off, Luffy and Fitz. Luffy, who in a lot of ways is still an enigma to me. Like, I know him well enough. Like, I would be friends with Luffy, but I don't know what's going on in his head. I don't know what he's feeling all the time. Fitz, however, I can read like a book. I do read him like a book. He is a book. Fitz is a book. Holy shit. That's the greatest metaphor of all time. Anyways. So, those are two of my favorite characters. I'm going to give you 5. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 characters that I really love, all for very different reasons. Because already these first two characters, I love them for completely different reasons. Fitz is a very frustrating person at times, and he makes decisions that I get upset with, and he does things that make me upset with him. But Luffy, he could do almost anything. I would never be angry at that man. I love him too much. And I love Fitz too much, but for very different reasons as characters. Anyways, that's the point I'm getting at, is I love all these people for extremely different reasons. So I could give you way more than 5. God, I could sit here all day talking about characters, but those two are two of my favorites. I'm trying to think of... Okay, because I want to go in a different direction with this. Another character I love comes from a standalone book. It's a character that stuck with me for a long time, and that I think, I'm not going to know as well as someone like Fitz or like Luffy, because I just never got to spend as much time with her as a character, because she's only in a standalone book. But if you've ever read The Sword of Kaigen, the main character, Misaki Matsuda, is a character that has really stuck with me in a lot of ways. And I read that book over a year ago now. God, it was like a year and a half ago. Jesus Christ, that feels wrong. But this is a character that, by all rights, I should have nothing in common with. She's like I think she's in her 40s. She has several kids. She's a woman, and like her life could not be any more different than mine. Like who she is as a person could not be any more different than who I am as a person. But she's someone whose internal struggle throughout that book, and the way she internalized things really spoke to me in a way I was not expecting at all. It's a character that, without saying too much, again, I don't want to get into spoilers about this book in case you haven't read it before, but she's a character who struggles with being present, I guess is the best way for me to put it. Struggles with being grateful for the moment. Is constantly looking ahead or looking backwards at different times in her life, and is trying to learn how to be happy with what she has, because she knows that she has things in her life that are so worthy of her love and her attention, and it's just this internal thing where she's struggling to really find how to do that. And it's not until tragedy strikes in her life that she's able to you figure out how to do that. And it's in some ways a little too late, which is part of the heartbreak of the story. But that's a character who I felt like their growth and their journey was something that is so relatable and so just impactful. And it hits this really specific emotion for me, this very specific mood that I have had a hard time putting words to in the past. And then I read this book and I was like, oh, this author gets it. This character gets it. They understand. And that's really hard, I think, for an author to do, is to really hone in on very specific emotions, because it's easier to write a character that's dealing with, like, grief. That's not true. That's not true. I take that back. I guess grief in the same way that, like, okay, you write a character whose best friend dies in front of them in a battle, and, like, okay, they're going to be sad. Maybe they want revenge. You can write, like, these really big emotions, You can write someone, again, like revenge, right? I just said it. Someone whose family gets murdered by a monster, and then they're going to go demon slayer, right? His whole family gets killed by demons, and so he decides, I'm going to go fucking kill some demons, right? Very easy emotion to write in some ways, because it's just so big, and it's so, like, straightforward, right? Like, that's just an emotion. Like, of course you're going to sympathize with that character, because it's a very basic emotion to just be like, he wants revenge because his whole family got fucking murdered by demons. Okay, yeah, of course, duh. Of course he wants to do that, right? And I think that you can do that for a lot of characters. You can just, and it's effective. I'm not saying this is bad by any means. It's very effective, and it's very simple in kind of hooking people in as a way to sympathize or empathize with the character. I think it's much more difficult to write about an emotion like what I just described with Misaki, that maybe not necessarily everyone has felt before, or that maybe a lot of people wouldn't even recognize in themselves. But the people who do, I think, are going to get a lot out of that story and out of that character, and I did. I did get a lot out of that character, and her journey just, it's just so... It's such a beautiful story. It's also such a heartbreaking story, and Misaki is at the center of that for me. And man, I did not think she was going to be the character that I ended up relating to in that story, but I did, and I loved it so much. That's a character that I don't have as much to say about because I don't have as much of a relationship with Misaki as I do with these other characters because I just didn't spend as much time with her. But that specific aspect of her character is something I haven't seen done in fantasy before, and it made me really latch on to her, and she's just never left my brain. Her story has never left my brain, and she's one of my favorite fictional characters because of that. So, moving on, that's three out of five, right? So this next one, I have a lot to say about, but if you had asked me about this character like a little over a month ago, I might have actually had something different to say about them, and that's going to be Kaladin Stormblessed. He is one of my favorite characters of all time, and I think it's pretty obvious why. I think for a lot of people, it's very obvious why. I mean, he's a fucking superhero. He's just like this really great guy who's... It's hard to explain, again, unless you've read it, but Kaladin is just like... He just fits the mold of a superhero so well. Like, he's just always saving the day. He has the most epic moments. He has the most epic, just emotional bursts and all these great things about him that just make him so incredibly easy to root for as a character. But what I love about him, and the reason that he has spoken to me so much as a character, is his mental health struggles, which is something that Brandon Sanderson, I think, may have leaned a little too hard into in the last book, Wind and Truth, and that he may have been a little too blunt in his unpacking of in the last book. God, I don't want to say... you know what? Let's pretend like I'm not talking about Wind and Truth. Let's talk about the first four books, where I think Kaladin's mental health struggle was actually handled extremely well. And I do think it was handled well in Wind and Truth. And I think especially the conclusion to his character arc in Wind and Truth was beautifully done. But it was a little too clinical and a little too, like, therapy talky in the last book for me. And that... I'll get to that, okay? But Kaladin is a character who is struggling with depression throughout the Stormlight Archive. And he's struggling with guilt. He's struggling with shame. He's struggling with feeling like he is enough and learning how to prioritize himself. And not just always be looking out for other people, and to actually look inwards and realize that if he doesn't help himself, he can't help other people. And I know it sounds like... God, this is what I mean by therapy talking in the last book. That is literally kind of... Anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything. Let's backtrack. I was about to go down a rabbit hole there. I love that about Kaladin's character, is that he's going through all of that stuff, because that is stuff I have personally gone through. It is stuff I still go through all the time. Like, there are still days where it's hard for me to look inward and be like, I need to focus on me today and not someone else or something else. It needs to be me. I have to care about myself. You know, that's really hard for me, and he is a character whose journey when I say all these characters have spoken to me in some way, this is a big one for me. Because I don't think the Stormlight Archive is necessarily the deepest or most philosophical or, you know, the most poetic in the way that it depicts emotion, but it does this specific thing extremely well, I think, and it really speaks to me in a way that I've never encountered in fiction. I feel so seen by Kaladin's struggles, just the way he thinks about that himself and about the world and the way he feels things. I'm like, that's me. I've struggled with depression for most of my life, and I probably will never not be struggling with it to some capacity. But it's part of my life, and it's part of Kaladin's life to just recognize that, like, that's just how it's going to be. And you don't have to let that control your life. You don't have to let it dominate you. You don't have to just be sad all the time. There are ways to fight back. There are ways to, even on a bad day, live with it and move on. And it's Kaladin's journey in this is equal parts spectacle and just like having these big bursts of magic and just these awesome moments, and also these very quiet moments where he's thinking about his life and the way he feels. And I've never seen that done, especially with a character like Kaladin, who is so much like a superhero and who is so like larger than life in a lot of ways, to really reel it back and look like, what is this person feeling that's not positive? You know, I think it's so easy with. Let's take it. Okay, let's take a step outside of books for a second. Let's look at someone like Captain America, right? I've seen all the MCU movies. Captain America, good character. I enjoy his presence on screen. I never felt like I understood his mental state even a fraction as good as I knew like Kaladin. Even like Iron Man, who had probably the most screen time out of any of the characters in the MCU, I understood his emotions to an extent. I never felt like it got as deep into the actual ramifications of like the things these people go through and like how that would affect a person, right? But with Kaladin, that's never spared. That's never spared is if he loses someone, or if he fails to save someone, or if something happens that is horrible, he's going to internalize that forever. And he does internalize it fucking forever, and he can't let go of it. And that's part of his journey, is like him trying to learn how to move on from that kind of stuff. Or not move on necessarily, but how to get out of his head about it. And I think that's a very realistic depiction of how someone would behave. Like if you watched one of your friends die in front of you, or like someone you love die in front of you, you're not just gonna like be fine. Like you're not just gonna like become a hero and then, oh, well, now I'm fine, guys. I'm actually, I'm good. I'm good now. And then occasionally there'll be a scene where they're like looking at the picture of the dead person in their living room and they're like, I miss you, Papa. And then that's all we get out of it, which is fine. It's fine. I'm not saying that's bad by any means. But with Kaladin, he's not just looking at the pictures of his dead friends and going, oh, I'm so sorry. Guys, I let you down. No, like he's like internalizing it and he's fucking miserable. And that to me is a very human depiction of what that would actually look like in a person. And apart from that, Kaladin, I also just love his personality. He's got like very dry humor, and he's pretty sarcastic sometimes, and like his humor, I will say, out of all Brandon Sanderson's characters, actually Kaladin's works the best for me sometimes, because he doesn't mean to be funny. I don't even think Brandon Sanderson means for him to be funny sometimes, but he is. Because he'll say some shit that's just like it is the most like stereotypical brooding guy thing ever. And I don't think it's meant to be funny, but it's funny to me, because if I saw someone behaving like that in real life, it would make me laugh. In an endearing way. Like, I think it's endearing with Kaladin, because he is a very sulky, broody guy, it just fits his personality. That's just, I think, a genius of it. And apart from all the stuff I just said, yeah, the epic moments, the awesome moments, of course, those make him a good character too. I love seeing him do awesome shit. He has literally almost every single scene in the Stormlight Archive that I would put in like the top 10 is going to be Kaladin. There's like a handful, maybe not even, like 3 that wouldn't be him, because he has all the best moments. Anyways, that's enough about Kaladin. Let's move on to the final character that I'm going to be talking about, which is Logan Ninefingers from the First Law series. I'm stuck. I was going to talk about a different character from Malazan, but I haven't read that series in a long time. It's been like 4 years. It's been, I don't know if I would have enough to say about them, because to be honest, as much as I loved them, I was going to talk about Animander Rake, and while I feel like I have a lot of things I could say, or Fiddler, or Tavor, there's a lot of characters I could talk about from that series, or Karsa, gee, there's so many good characters from that series, but it's been 4 years since I read that series, and I feel like I just don't have as much to say as I would if it was a little fresher in my mind, so on a reread, I'll probably have more to say about those characters, but I want to talk about Logan Ninefingers first. And the reason he's one of my favorite characters of all time is, again, different than the rest of these characters. He's not a character that I necessarily relate to. I do have his words tattooed on me, though. I have "better to do it than live with the fear of it" tattooed on my thigh, which is a Logan Ninefingers quote. And it's not because I relate to him. It's not because I feel like I have anything in common with Logan Ninefingers. It's because I think it's a wise saying, and that's part of what I want to talk about with Logan. If you've never read the First Law series, Logan Ninefingers is like, if you had a D&D party, he's a barbarian. He's a barbarian, And when you meet him, he seems like a pretty decent guy. He's like probably in that first book especially the most morally upright character that you encounter. Like he's just like seems like he's a nice guy. But he's always thinking about and talking about how he's done horrible shit before. So you know that there's something there. You know that there's like more to him. I'm not going to say anything else, again, for the sake of spoilers, just in case you've never read First Law. He is a very duplicitous person, but not in the way that word is usually used, where it's like someone being intentionally deceitful. Logan is just, there are like two halves of him. And if you've read the series, you know exactly what I mean by that. It's like there's these two sides of Logan that are at war with each other. And on one side is like the greatest guy ever. Like just a genuinely good dude who's just like, I would want to get a beer with him. You know, I would love to hang out with Logan Ninefingers. Then there's this other half of him that is an absolute fucking monster. Like an actual monster. And I can't say anything else without spoiling anything, but these two sides of him and the way that they connect to the themes of First Law and the way that they unravel through this story is one of the greatest character arcs I have ever encountered in my life. It's so hard to say anything without spoiling anything, but Logan, he's just one of those characters that I have never encountered a character quite like him before, because he's both extremely likable and extremely detestable. And you could say that for all of the First Law characters, really, but I think Logan exemplifies it the most. Because someone like Glokta, if you've read the series, yeah, he's contemptible, but like he's also like, no one doesn't love Glokta. Let's be real, okay? Everyone fucking loves Glokta. And I can't say anything, but Logan is a character where if you don't like him, if you actually hate him by the end of the original trilogy, I get it. There's ambiguity about him that I find fascinating, where you don't know how much of himself is actually good and how much of himself is actually bad, and which side of him is the true him, you know? Which side of him is which side of him should define him? Which side of Logan Ninefingers should be the side of him that defines him? That's a really hard question to ask, I think. And it's something that I think First Law just did brilliantly, and that character, God, he's just so... there are so many scenes that have stuck in my head with him because of... And not just action scenes. He has some great action scenes, but just dialogues he had with other characters that revealed so much about who he actually is and the depths of both his evil and his righteousness... Not his righteousness, his goodness, I guess. Just goodness in his evil. And it's so purposefully done. I know Joe Abercrombie did it on purpose. There's two chapters in the final book that it's just back-to-back chapters of Logan speaking to one character and then to another character. And one character says, "You're the greatest man that I've ever known." The other man says, "You're an absolute worthless piece of shit, horrible human being. I never want to see you again." And I understand both of them. I understand both of why they would say that about him based on their interactions with him. And that's just... Dude, brilliant writing. Absolutely brilliant writing. Logan Ninefingers is one of those characters that I think when I reread First Law, I'm just going to get so much more out of his character too, because now I know more about him, and I'm going to probably pick up on things that Joe Abercrombie was kind of laying down thematically with his character all throughout his character arc that I am excited to get to. So... yeah, those are my five, well, maybe not my top 5 characters, but 5 of my favorite characters that I love for all very, very different reasons. And I don't know, I just wanted to chat about characters for a while because when I was sitting down and thinking about Fitz after I finished the Tawny Man trilogy, I was like, man, this is such a unique experience to have read a series where I know a character like this. And I was trying to think of another series where I've done it, and I couldn't. And then it led me down this rabbit hole of thinking about other characters that I love and why I love them. And I realized that most of my favorite characters have literally nothing in common with each other. Like, they're just all so different, and they're all so... like, their purposes in the story are so different. And the way that they are perceived by the author is so different. And I think that's fascinating from a creative standpoint, and something I love talking and thinking about as someone who loves storytelling, because I think that exemplifies the power of storytelling, that we can have so many characters that we love for different reasons, and that they can all speak to us in equal parts, but for completely different aspects of who they are, you know? So anyways, that's the end of that rant. I'm over time already, so I'm going to have to wrap things up here. I hope you got something out of this. If you like talking about characters, let me know what some of your favorite characters are and why you love them so much. I'll get back to you soon at the end of the week with a weekly update. I'm going to have lots of fun adventures in Bangkok, I'm sure. I'm going to be doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm probably going to bed right now. Wait, what time is it? Probably going to bed right now because I am a sleepy boy. I am a sleepyhead. And do I want to go to bed? I don't actually know. Maybe I'll step outside and go do something else. Not a great idea, though. I should probably sleep. Can you tell that I'm getting tired? Side note, this is last thing before I get out of this podcast here, because I know I'm not going to remember to talk about this in my weekly update. There are some, sorry, this is nothing to do with books. I'm sure a lot of you are clicking off right now, but I have to get this out there because it's been in my thoughts for forever. I have seen some crazy shirts in the past, not just here, every time I've come to Asia, and I've never talked about it with anyone. There are some insane shirts. When I was in Japan, there was a market that was selling AI-generated photos of Donald Trump on t-shirts. And right beside those t-shirts, I shit you not, were more AI-generated photos of women with the biggest badonkadonks you've ever seen in your life. And I can't even, you know what? I'm not going to describe them for you. I'm not going to describe these shirts. They were fucking insane. They were crazy. All of them. Every single one of them. If you are buying one of those shirts, jail. Your bloodline ends with you. You're never reproducing, and you should not be allowed to. But see, we circle back here. It's kind of funny though. If you buy one of them as a gag gift, that's funny. If you're buying it to wear it, euthanization. I just saw one in the Bangkok market. Dude, who is buying this shirt? I never want to meet one of these people. It's this fucking shirt. So you know the scene from Wolf of Wall Street where Leonardo DiCaprio does cocaine out of Margot Robbie's ass crack? You know, if you've ever seen that movie, oh god. So it's just 2 screenshots of that movie, that specific scene, and they just put them on a white t-shirt. Sorry, my microphone just glitched out, so the audio is going to sound different here for just the last 20 seconds of this podcast. But anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Enough talking about weird t-shirts. I will see you in the next video, in the next podcast. And until then, I hope you're happy and healthy. I hope you're doing well. And I'll see you then. Bye-bye.